word. People are very confused and they want to know, okay, what's about to happen as God sees it. Today, we're going to go, in fact, you can open your Bible to the book of Ezekiel chapter 37. I'll read one or two verses from Ezekiel 37. We will begin there. And the title of this message sounds a little unusual. Ezekiel's boneyard is shaken again. The details of Iran's plan to attack Israel and the impact impact the United States. Now this says Iran's plan to attack. You say that's reverse. Israel will attack Iran. Yes, they will try to preempt it. But this man has a plan of doing something, and we're going to expose it tonight and show you what he's really up to and the motive behind it. In Ezekiel chapter 37, the prophet had a very strange vision of a valley full of dry bones, and God asked him, can the bones live? God says to him, I want you to speak or prophesy over this valley of bones. And he said, all of a sudden, when I began to preach to them, the bones started coming together, and they stood up and looked like skeletons. And God said, continue to preach over them. And suddenly skin began to appear, and it says that they became a great army. Now, the interpretation of this vision is found in chapter 37, verse 11. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. They indeed say, our bones are dry, our hope is lost, and we ourselves are cut off. Therefore prophesy and say to them, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, O my people, I will open up your graves and cause you to come out of your graves and bring you back into the land of Israel. Then over in verse 21 it says, Thus saith the Lord God, I will take the children of Israel from among the nations, whether they have gone, and will gather them from every side, and bring them back into their own land, and make them one nation. I will simplify this vision by making this statement to you. Jewish rabbis and religious Jewish people will tell you that is a prophecy about one thing, the Holocaust. If you've ever seen Holocaust pictures, the Jews look like skeletons with skin on them. And God brought them up out of a time of death. You understand, those who they captured, those who the Allies went in and rescued, were headed to the ovens and to the camps. They were near death. They were going to their grave. And God brought them out of their grave, brought them back to the land of Israel. Now that was the Holocaust that lasted from 1939 to about 1945. Now watch the order. When you flip the page in your Bible, or it may be the same page, but when I flip the page, I come to Ezekiel chapter 38. When I come to Ezekiel 38, Israel is dwelling safely. They are in their land. Their towns have no walls around them. And God says now there's going to come an invasion of a northern army called the War of Gog and Magog. And one of the first countries, this is significant, this is where we're going in a moment, one of the first countries that the prophet mentions that will be involved in attacking Israel is Persia. That's chapter 38, verse 5. Now, Persia, as you know, is the country of Iran today. In fact, your pastor has probably shared with you that his family roots go back to the Persians or to the Iranians. Now, this is important. I want to tell a story and then go from here. In ancient Roman history, a Roman law prohibited the Roman army legion from crossing a river called the Rubicon. The river was the boundary between two provinces that divided the north from the south. However, in 49 BC, 49 years before Christ, Julius Caesar and his army crossed this boundary of the Rubicon, thus making war with Rome inevitable. Throughout history, the term crossing the Rubicon has been an idiom to describe the point of no return. And I've heard it used from time to time. They're about to cross the Rubicon. Now, what does this mean? It means that once you get to a certain point, you don't go back. You will have war. The reason I'm sharing that with you is there is a leader in Iran today called Ahmadinejad. And Ahmadinejad, and by the way, the word M-A-D, mad, is right in the middle of his name, and that's what he is. He's a madman. But this man is after nuclear weapons. There is no question about it. He has publicly made it known. He's also publicly made it known once he gets them, he's not afraid to use them. He is about to cross the Rubicon. What does that mean? A point of no return. Him Him gaining access to nuclear weapons changes not only the course of all Middle East, it changes the course of the entire world. The greatest concern behind the scenes that the United States has is this man gaining nuclear weapons. It's with our military, they're concerned, but it especially concerns a prime minister in Israel by the name of Benjamin Netanyahu, who knows that if this man gets a weapon capable of reaching Tel Aviv, he will use it. So for the next few moments, we're going to talk about Ezekiel's boneyard shaking again. We will begin somewhere very unusual. In fact, let's go there. There are three recent historical events that changed the world. Here's what they are. When oil was discovered in the Arabian Peninsula in the early 1900s, that brought wealth to the sons of Ishmael. When Hitler created the Holocaust from 1939 to 45, it led to the restoration of Israel in 1948. Had there been no Holocaust, there would probably been no compassion to the Jews to have their own nation. Number three was the invention of the nuclear bomb. The nuclear bomb caused America to become instantly overnight the superpower of the world in 1945 when two bombs were dropped on Japan. These three events, the discovery of oil, the Holocaust and the rise and death of Hitler, and the invention of the nuclear bomb, those three things changed prophetically, historically, the entire world. There have also been three inventions that have changed the world that all carry prophetic implication. The first was television. Television was introduced from 1941 to 1948, and the first TV license in the United States were granted during those time frames. And this is the reason television is important. Luke 12:3, whatever you have spoken in the dark will be heard in the light. What you've spoken in the ear in the inner rooms will be proclaimed from the housetops. Nothing is hid now. Satellite enables people to go around the world, and from the housetop where the satellite, are you listening? Where the satellite dishes sit, nothing is hidden anymore. Number two is satellite itself. Satellite. In 1957, Sputnik was sent up into the atmosphere, and it created the time we call satellite technology. In Revelation 1:7, when Jesus returns, it says, every eye shall see him. That was impossible until the invention of satellite that enables a picture to go around the world to everyone that can receive that particular network or channel, whatever it may be. Now, the Bible says, I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. Some suggest that this messenger that is in the heavens is nothing else but a satellite that's in effect that is going into all the nations of the world at one time preaching the gospel. It is very interesting that one of the biggest Christian satellites is called Sky Angel. And there's an angel preaching the gospel. Now, whether or not that is the fulfillment of that, I'm not going to tell you. Only God knows. It's interesting. Number three is the internet. Now, Al Gore did not invent the internet. The internet existed. I just had to say that. The internet existed in 1969. The United States government was already using it in a very early form. But the internet is interesting because by the internet, I love this, you can do a live webcast around the world. And the Bible said the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world as a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. So these three inventions, the television, the satellite, and the internet, have all come into existence in the generation of the men and women sitting here, and these technologies not only have changed the world, they will change the world as it relates to the gospel and getting the word of God out, and they're also going to change the world prophetically in the very, very near future. Now, just like there had been three events, three inventions, there are three coming events mentioned in prophecy that are all linked together, and I want to share those with you now. The three events that are going to set prophecy in motion for the very end of days are, number one, the rise of Persia. Persia, or Iran, has sort of been a backwood nation over the years. It is not any longer. The rise of Persia and Islam gaining access to weapons and mass destruction and technology is one event. Number two, Persia is involved with other nations in the war of Gog and Magog. The alignment of those nations for that war, mentioned in Ezekiel 38 and 39, are going to set prophecy in motion. And the final thing, those two things you look at there, number number 1 and 2, are going to lead to number 3 eventually, the formation of 10 kings or 10 regions of the world that are identified as 10 horns on the beast, but are also in chapter 2 in Nebuchadnezzar's dream identified as the 10 toes on this metallic image. And when those 10 kings formed, Daniel said, the stone that was cut out without hands, the Messiah's kingdom, shall crush the toes and break him in pieces, and the kingdoms of this world will become the kingdoms of our God. Meaning that when we see those things begin to develop, we know that it is a sign and an indicator that we are entering into a brand new time frame of biblical prophecy being fulfilled. Now, here's the event again. I want to go back that will change the world. If the country of Iran or Persia can gain access to 1, weapons of mass destruction, and 2, nuclear weapons, it changes the entire course of Middle East history forever. Anyone in our military knows this. Anyone in Israel in the military knows this, and actually common people know this as well if they're paying attention to what's happening now. Now, let me share something with you. The question often rises, and I have a lot of people ask me questions about this. Why is a man like Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, why is he so bent on having to have these weapons? Why is he telling the other Muslim countries we all need nuclear weapons? The answer is very simple, but yet complex. Let me explain it to you if I can. Christianity precedes Islam by hundreds of years. Islam was founded by Muhammad in 622 AD. He formed a brand new religion with a brand new holy book that was written after his death called the Quran. The individuals who follow Muhammad's teaching are called Muslims. And Islam simply is a word that means submission. It means submission to Allah. Allah is the Arabic form of the name of God. And they talk about praise be to Allah or Allah be praised. It is a different translation of the name of God. Now they say it's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But some liberal Islamic scholars will confess that it is actually a name, a pre-Islamic name of a moon deity, Al-Elat, that existed before Muhammad was ever born. I'm not going to debate that tonight, but I will show you this. That centuries ago, after Muhammad's death, the Muslims began to conquer by the sword. And they began to go into Europe and the Middle East and take over entire lands, especially the Arabic-speaking people and the Arab people were very open to follow the teaching of Muhammad. Now watch this because this is important. There were battles that began to develop early in history between Christians and between Muslims. Some of them were called crusades. They were very terrible. But it was a war between Islam and what we call traditional Roman Christianity or Greek Christianity. And the battles were, and I don't want to get into all the things about the wars, but what happened was eventually an empire began to form in the Muslim world. That empire would be later called the Ottoman Turkish Empire. It began to form in 1299. And come on, let's see, do we have a map of that? I don't know if I have that on my PowerPoint. Let me see if I've got that. Yeah, thank you guys. But the Ottoman Turkish Empire once controlled the Middle East, much of Europe, and it was one of the largest empires to exist. It existed from 1299 to 1922, and it was later replaced by the Republic of Turkey. It took the whole northern part of Africa. It went down into the Arabian Peninsula. It went all the way over toward Baghdad, into Lebanon, into Syria, up into Turkey, and up into what is now known as the 5 southern Russian states. This was a major empire. At the height of its power, it spanned 3 continents and took 29 provinces and different states with it. So, this was the highlight of Islam. This was the time when it developed its technologies, it developed art, it developed all these other things. Now, having said that, when the Ottoman Turkish Empire was broken up, and it was broken up by the French, the British, and the Americans, all 3, and when it happened in 1922, then since that moment, Islam has wanted to reform another empire. Their goal, though, now listen to me very carefully, now, in modern time, their goal is not to simply reform the territory of the Ottoman Turks. Their goal is to move north into Europe. Their goal is to take over Germany and Italy and Spain and Belgium and Austria and France. Did you know that the French now have 6 million Muslims living in France? The reason they don't deal with them much is because they're such a force that they could literally, which they have done, cause riots and just burn cities down in their entirety. Europe has opened up their borders to the Islamic world. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. People are people. However, the Muslims, by and large, that have come in have not settled well with the culture of the French and the Germans and the Europeans. They maintain their cultural habits and traditions. So this has caused what I call a cultural clash. Now, let's talk about Islam itself for a minute. Is everybody still here? Say, I'm here. Let's talk about Islam itself for a moment, because what we have happening now is this. Everybody in Europe is talking about the need of a global new world order. Tony Blair talked about it. Henry Kissinger's talked about it. Chavez has talked about it. The Chinese leaders talked about it. And number two, they've talked about the necessity of having a currency that is not the dollar. The reason they're not willing yet to give up the dollar is there are too many dollars out there. And anybody also, let me just say this on the negative side, in the drug world, there are warehouses in South America, warehouses that have $100 bills stacked up to the roof, and the rats are eating them because they have no way of laundering those $100 bills. There is huge amounts of money out there in dollars, and that's one reason why they haven't ever transferred anything over, is because of things like this. But let me show you this. Islam, since the death of Muhammad, its founder, has had a battle between two groups. One group is called the Sunni, and the other is called the Shia. Now, what I want to do is share with you the differences of these two religions, because this is going to help you understand something you've seen on the news in Iraq lately. The Sunni branch believe that the first four caliph, now the caliph is the appointed leader over the religion, were the rightful leaders. The Shia branch says the fourth caliph, which is Ali, is the true successor to the Prophet Muhammad. The Sunnis believe that they were followers of Abu. There are 800 million. Now, this is a low number. It's actually more than this, but this is a rounded out low number for the Middle East and Asia. The followers of Ali, the Shia branch believe that Ali was the leader, the true heir. There's 100 million of them. The Sunnis believe the Mahdi will emerge at the end of days. Now, I'll talk about him in a moment, the last awaited one. The Sunnis believe the Mahdi has been here, disappeared, and is in hiding, in oculation, but will reappear at the end of days. The Sunnis believe, the Sunnis have 90% of the Islamic world. 90%, 9 out of 10 Muslims are Sunnis. 10% of the Islamic world is Shia. 2% of the nation of Iran is Sunni, but 2% of, yes, that's right. 2% of the nation of Iran is Sunni Muslim, but 88% of the nation of Iran is Shia Muslim. Now, that's important that you understand that the Iranians are predominantly Shia and not Sunni. All right? The next part is this. In the Sunni branch, they believe the Mahdi will appear in Samarra, Iraq. In the Shia branch, they believe the Mahdi is hidden in the cave in Karbala, Iraq, and he will emerge at the end of days. Important you hear this. In the Sunni branch, it has been headquartered for centuries in Baghdad, Iraq. The Shias had their headquarters in Damascus, Morocco, and Egypt, and now they consider Tehran, Iran, to be their headquarters until the Mahdi appears. That's the difference between the two religions. Now, these two religions have fought each other so much that when Muhammad died and the religion split between the Sunnis and the Shias, here's what happened. The Shias killed and murdered the first 11 leaders of the other branch. In other words, the Sunnis killed and murdered 11 of the Shia leaders. And they killed most of them in Damascus or in Iraq, a few in the Arabian area. Now, this is what's important to understand. There was a son of number 11, and they simply called the 12th Imam. This son disappeared. As a matter of fact, it was somewhere in the year 931 when the 12th Imam, the son of the 11th, he disappeared. Now, they say he disappeared because the Shia Muslims living in Iraq were afraid that they were going to kill that boy and thus destroy the lineage of succession of the Imams. They stuck him in a well in a cave, and he never came out. Ahmadinejad believes that 12th Imam is called the hidden Imam or the secret Imam. He believes that now listen, this is important you hear this. He said 3 years ago, the Mahdi, that's what they called this one. They call him the Mahdi, the awaited one, the expected one, the one that's going to be the last leader, the one that's going to bring Islamic justice, the one who's going to reorganize the Islamic world into one big empire. He has said, he appeared to me in a dream, this is several years ago, and said that I have to start a war and destroy Israel and destroy the United States with weapons, and then he will appear. In a conversation just a few months ago, Ahmadinejad talked to a Muslim friend of his, and I've got a transcript of the conversation, and in this conversation, he said, the Mahdi is already among us, he is already here, I know who he is, and in the transcript, this man, this leader of Iran, broke down and began to weep and said he's about to make his appearance, but there are things I have to do before he is ready to appear in the world. Now let me just stop right here before I go a little bit further and say to you that all of the definitions, by definition, of everything that they're looking for in this Mahdi man is similar to the biblical Antichrist. And that's what I'm going to share with you in a moment. Now, this battle has taken place. The Shias are concentrated in Iran. They also 60% of Iraq, and there's also a large group in Lebanon. There's a whole strip of Shia Muslims. They believe they have suffered loss of this divinely guided political leadership in 931, and it will be restored to them at the very, very end of days. Now, there is a battle taking place in the country of Iraq right now. Our military, I don't think, understood it, because I don't think our leaders in America understood it, even President Bush, when we went to fight this battle. We were going to go into an area where they have been fighting each other for centuries. We were going to go into an area where two religions oppose one another, listen, in their prophetic belief. Now, the reason there was no fighting under Saddam Hussein, basically, between the Sunnis and the Shia tribes, is because he'd kill anybody fighting. He'd go cut their arm off, cut their head off, and make an example of them. Now, Saddam was with the Ba'ath Party. The Ba'ath Party is Sunni. Saddam hated Shias. Why did he hate Shia? Because he hated them that for 10 years he had a battle with the country of Iran. So Iran and Iraq had a battle for 10 years, and anybody that was a Shia Muslim, Saddam, there's actually mass graves with hundreds and thousands of bodies of men, women, and children that he had shot in southern Iraq that he thought they were going to rise up against him. In fact, after the Gulf War, there were thousands and thousands of Kurds that were gassed with nerve gas. Some of them, many died, but many have children born retarded with birth defects, 6 fingers on each hand and whatever. And so Saddam was a Sunni, but he was with the Ba'ath Party, and the Shias were very, very persecuted under him. I predicted in a book years ago that I wrote called Unleashing the Beast. In fact, I had a colonel read it, and he went out and ate lunch with me, and he was totally stunned. He said, you predicted in this book that when America went to war that the Shia Muslims would be the governing power in the country of Iraq. He said, I would have never believed it, because it was always the Sunnis that were in power. But see, I was basing it on Bible prophecy. So if you base it on what you see in prophecy, you'll always be correct. And there has been, in the past, a Shia government in the country of Iraq. Why? Because the Americans were afraid if we put the Sunnis in, they would be loyal to Saddam Hussein, and they would not bring peace in Iraq. Now, is everybody still here? Are you catching it? Say amen if you're catching it. I don't want to lose you. I know it gets bogged down a little bit with some of this stuff, but I don't want to lose you. Now, what's happened is this. There are two battles of two nations, number 7, guys, taking place. And here's what's happening. If you take the country of Iraq, the Kurds, there's 30 million of them to the north. They love America. Their whole northern country is being blessed. They got malls and Hummers and boom boxes and ice cream shops. You never see them on the news. How many know good news never makes the news? You know it's the truth, don't you? Now, in the middle is called the Sunni Triangle. That's where the American troops have had most of their fighting. The explosive devices along the road. To the south, near the border of Iran, is where the Shiites live, okay? So, one of our military men said, let's divide it in 3 parts. Let's put the Kurds in the north, the Sunnis in the middle, and the Shiites in the south. Now, that makes sense till you understand who's going to get the oil money. Because you got pipelines running from the north, so the Kurds could say, wait a minute, we get all the money. Well, the people in the Sunni Triangle say, wait a minute. No, wait a minute. The Shia said, the refineries are in the south near the water. We get all the money. That's where the big issue has been. They can't figure out who divides the money. Oh, come on, talk to me now, somebody. Now, so what I want you to understand is this, that 60% are Shias, 20% are Sunni, 15-20% are Kurds, and they're basically Sunni, but they are very much nationalistic. They live near the border of Turkey. Turkey is scared to death of them, and every now and then the Kurds will go across the Turkish border and a little war will break out because the Turks are afraid of the Kurds. By the way, you know who the Kurds really are? You ready? This is the God's truth. They are the ancient Medes. In the Bible, the Medes and the Persians, they are the ancient Medes. And as a matter of fact, they were present on the day of Pentecost when the Holy Ghost was poured out. Read your Bible. They have a great history about them. Now, having said that, there's a battle between the Sunnis and the Shias in Iraq right now. But let's go a step further. There is a battle between two cities. Now, this is where the story, if you've never heard this, gets really strange. One group believes that Karbala is the place that the last leader, the Mahdi, is going to appear. The awaited one, the anticipated one, the one that will bring Islamic justice, the one that will tear down the crosses, that means defeat Christianity, kill the swine, which is the Jews, take over Jerusalem from the hands of the Jewish people and liberate it. The other group believes that Samarra, Iraq, is where the Mahdi is going to appear. As a matter of fact, the Shias look at Karbala and the Sunnis look at Samarra. Now, why is this interesting? Because there was a Golden Dome mosque that was blown up a few years ago by terrorists who were of the other branch of Islam. Then this other branch in Karbala went down here to Samarra and blew a mosque up. They're blowing each other's mosque up. Do you want me to tell you why? Now, Fox News didn't tell you this. CNN didn't tell you this. I can tell you because I know the Middle East and I've studied Islam. I know prophecy. They are blowing the mosque up where the Mahdi is supposed to appear. That's why they did it. So they go to the Gold Dome and they tell the Shias, the Mahdi is not going to come out of that well here and he's not going to come out of that cave because we're going to blow the mosque up where he can't appear. Then this other group gets mad and says, well, if you're going to blow our mosque up, we're going to blow yours up so the Mahdi cannot appear from there. Now, here's what you've got to understand. What is interesting is both of these religions, the Sunnis and the Shia, believe that Iraq is where the activity is going to take place. When Muhammad talked about there would be one that would come from my lineage, and he'll be the awaited one, and you can look to him when he predicted that, and when the Hadith, which is the people who knew Muhammad writing all they knew about him. When the Hadith talks about this and talks about the Mahdi appearing, you've got to remember they all believe Iraq is the location, but they believe there's going to be two different places. Now, having said that, let's go a little deeper. Anybody want to go deeper in this? Anybody learning anything right now? Raise your hands. Anybody learning anything at all? I'm going to give you the signs that have been preached lately in the Islamic world showing the time of the end. Number one, the Mahdi of Islam will appear. He will arrive when there are terrible disputes and differences going on in the world and there are earthquakes on earth. He will arrive when there is terrible internal fighting among the tribes of Arabia and other places of the world. The Euphrates River will reveal a huge mountain of gold causing fighting among the people. They're still looking for this. I'm telling you, they believe this is going to happen. And that hasn't, of course, happened yet. The earth will swallow a village near Damascus. So there'll be a huge earthquake near Damascus. There'll be a huge village that will be swallowed. That has not happened yet. But here's the big one. An army with black banners will come from the east in Khorasan. Now, this prophecy is so important, and I want to explain to you why. In the Shiite religion, the color black is very, very, very important. Okay? And so the Iranian leaders, religious leaders, their imams, always wear black turbans, and you will see them waving black banners. They do this if it's in, not so much in southern Iraq. You do see that, in fact, Muqtada al-Sadr, who has caused the United States great difficulties, formed an army in Iraq called the Mahdi Army. He started out with 500 seminary students. There's now 60 to 70,000 militia that are with him. And when the U.S. troops came in to capture him, he fled to, guess where? Iran. Because he's a Shia Muslim. Are you listening to me right now? And he has the Mahdi army in Iraq. So this is the anticipation of what they're looking for. Let me show you a map of the area. Khorasan was the last eastern province of the Persian Empire, and it means the land of the sunrise. Today, that area would be the following countries. It would include Iraq, it would include Iran, it would include Turkmenistan, it would include Tajikistan, and it would include Afghanistan. This area that you're looking at is the old Persian Empire. So when Muhammad and those who followed him gave a prediction to look for the people with the black banners, for when you see the people with the black banners, the Mahdi will be among them. Everybody in this part of the world who's a part of that religion wears a black turban if they are a leader of the Shia branch of Islam. You will also see black banners in parades, and black banners sometimes with things written on them. Meaning, this is the group right there. Look at those nations. This is the group that believes that they are the fulfillment of the ancient predictions given by some of either Muhammad, founder of Islam, or some of their early leaders. Now here's something you need to understand. This is the area of wars that before the appearing of the Islamic Mahdi are going to be taking place. Now, this is interesting. Black banners, because I've been talking about this. Might as well show you a little photograph of this. Number 10, guys. There's the Shia clerics. Notice all of them have the black turban upon their head. The Shia Muslim leaders, the imams and clerics, wear black turbans. They do it in Iran, they do it in Syria, and they do it in Lebanon. The Taliban used a white flag and a black flag. Al-Qaeda has a black flag, and all of these flags have designs on them. The Taliban and Al-Qaeda both believed that they are the promised black banners mentioned by Muhammad. Now what they're doing, in my opinion, is not fulfilling a prophecy of someone that was divinely inspired to prophesy. They are taking a statement which was made in a prediction, and they're fulfilling it themselves. If the Bible said, look in the last days for those who will be wearing white all the time, for they shall be the ones anticipating my return, guess what would happen? I'll guarantee you we'd have a church of white robes. We would. Why are you wearing white? Well, I'm just fulfilling what Jesus said. It's the last days. They're doing the same thing. You understand? It's called a self-fulfilling prophecy, trying to make happen what is expected to happen. Somebody give the Lord a praise right here. Woo, before I go on. Lord, I got to try to get all of this in. Now, let me show you something that I think is interesting here. I'm just going to throw this nugget out. In the book of Daniel chapter 8 verses 1 through 4, Daniel says this, that he was in a vision down by the river, and he said, here's what I saw in a vision. I lifted my eyes and saw, and there standing beside the river was a ram which had two horns which were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. Now look this way, let me explain this to you. Prophecy scholars, every book you read will tell you what that interpretation is. Watch this. On this image, the chest and arms of silver are the Medo-Persian Empire. This is the empire you read about in the book of Esther. When Queen Esther became the queen, the Medes and Persians had 120 provinces they were ruling over. Okay? That's the empire. However, in Daniel, empires are often identified by the symbols of animals. Now, I always wanted to know why. Why is one empire a bear? And why is one a lion? And why is one like a leopard? Then I go to Daniel and I read this one and I know who it is. It's the Medes and the Persians, two horns of a ram. I'm going to give you a nugget to think about because I'm doing a message on this in which I'm showing ancient empires chose constellations in the heaven to identify their empire. Here is the constellation in heaven that the Medes and the Persians chose. Look at it. This is a constellation, one of the constellations. It's Aries the ram. And there is a constellation in heaven of a ram with 2 horns. Now you say, are you just making that up? No, let me share something with you. This is history. Persia was associated with the image of a ram. The king of Persia led his army to battle and did not wear a crown, but wore a ram's head with horns as a headpiece. The constellation Aries the ram has been associated with the Persians. Now guess what? Guess what else is in heaven? A bear, an eagle, a lion, Britain and England, Lion of Judah. Judah's emblem is the lion. Leo the lion was the emblem of the tribe of Judah. And a dragon. Ever heard of China's emblem? Oh, come on, talk to me, somebody. Ancient empires took on constellations in the heaven and made their emblem connected to a somebody missed a good place to say that's wild. Now, I want to go back to something because something is emerging, and that is this. Iran, which is ancient Persia, is trying to reform the old Persian Empire that existed back in the time of Cyrus and Darius the Mede. Now, if you want to know how big that empire was, let's go and check this out, because the Persian Empire in Esther's day was very, very large. As a matter of fact, everything on the map outlined in green is the empire from Esther's day. 29 regions or territories, 60 individual nations, a total eventually of 127 provinces that were subdivided. Now let me tell you the territory this would include. Now this is very important you understand this. The old Persian Empire in the time of Esther would include Lebanon, Assyria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Northern Africa, Ethiopia, Libya, up into, now, what is important? Why is it significant for you to understand that? They are all Muslim government-controlled nations. Wow! Tremendous. Now, it's just a little saying I do every now and then. Now, let's go. Anybody want to take this a little deeper? Oh, that wasn't enough. I'm just going to close my Bible. Just quit preaching right here. Now, I've written on this a book called, not what I'm just sharing with you here, but I wrote a book called Unleashing the Beast. And it was a revelation the Lord gave me, but I've got to tell you what happened in the early 1990s. I was preaching in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I was in Revelation 13, so I have to tell you about Revelation 13. Revelation 13, 1 through 2, describes a beast which is going to rise up at the time of the end. And the beast looks like a bear and a leopard and a lion. All right? It's the kingdom of the Antichrist. Then I'm in the middle of preaching, and the next night I go to Revelation 13:11 at Christian Life Fellowship in Baton Rouge, and I preach on the second beast of Revelation, the false prophet, the lamb with 2 horns. My thesis, and I had probably 400 LSU students there that night in the crowd. Some of them are pastoring great churches now, and it's an honor to see that maybe we had, some impartation of the word in their life as the young men. But let me say this. I preached that, and I said, here's what's going to happen. The Antichrist will come to power. He will be a military leader, because who can make war against the beast? But there will be a religious leader, possibly a defective pontiff pope, who will align with him, deny that Jesus is the Son of God, and that's the false prophet. Service is over. Young girl comes up to me. She's from Persia, and her name is Ellie. And she says, everybody in my family is Shia Muslim, except me. I'm a Christian. She says, now, you blew me away tonight. I've never heard anybody preach prophecy like this, but you just described what they told me as a little Persian girl in the country of Iran. I said, what do you mean? She said, about the Mahdi and Jesus. I said, what is the Mahdi? This is 1992, I think, when I said this. She says, you've never heard of that. I said, I haven't read or heard about it. And she says, well, I need to explain it. So my wife and I and my boy were staying at a couple's house, and they knew Ellie. Ellie came over for 2 nights straight, and here's basically what she told me. She said, Muslims believe in Jesus. I said, are you serious? Yes. But they don't believe he's the Son of God, and they don't believe he was crucified. They believe before he was crucified, somebody took his place. God changed his countenance, and someone like Judas actually died on the cross. Jesus was taken to heaven. God rebuked Jesus and said, why did you say that you're my son when I have no son? So Jesus, at the end of days, has to come back to earth, and he has to tell everybody, I am not the Son of God, I lied. But he will prove he's from God by doing miracles, and he will follow the Mahdi. I said, who's the Mahdi? She said, the Mahdi is a person that's going to rise. She said, now, in Iran, we believe it's a man that in the 9th century, or 10th century, well, it was 9, I gave you the date a minute ago, was hid in a well. And he's been in oculation like a bear goes into hibernation. He's been living supernaturally in the cave. At the end of days, he will come out of this cave, and him and Jesus, now listen, him and Jesus will convert the world to Islam. I said, they taught you that. She says, but that's not the heavy stuff. I said, don't tell me. I said, that's the beast of Revelation. That's the Antichrist, Revelation 13:1 and 2. And that's the false prophet of chapter 13:11. It's a person posing as Jesus. She says, thank you. That's what I'm trying to tell you. She said, I didn't even know all this was predicted in the Bible about the Antichrist and the false prophet. She says, I was taught it from that perspective, but right over here it is. She says, but that's not the heavy part. I said, well, give me the heavy part. She said, you know when you read that verse in Revelation 6 when Jesus breaks the first seal and this man comes on a white horse conquering and to conquer? I said, yeah, it's the Antichrist. She said, well, did you know that we're all taught in Islam in the Middle East that when the Mahdi appears, he comes riding on a white horse? I said, come on. She gave me the quotes. I said, you want me to go a step further? I said, I sure do. I said, she said, here's something else you need to understand. We were taught, you can go, this is heavy. We were taught that when the Mahdi comes, he makes a treaty with the Jews for 7 years. I'm freaking out by now. I said the whole book of Revelation is the 7-year tribulation. Daniel 9:27, he makes a covenant for 7 years. She says, thank you. Then she says this. She says, it gets a little bit deeper than that. I said, please don't tell me it gets deeper than that. She says, yeah, if you don't convert under the Mahdi, you are beheaded. Revelation 20, I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the testimony of Jesus Christ, which there'll be people in the tribulation who miss the rapture that are going to die by beheading because they know there's no other way of getting out of what's about to happen. And the only religion, to my knowledge, that actually practices beheading is the Islamic religion. And I'm going to tell you, 2 days with that girl was all I could handle. I overdosed on knowledge, and I couldn't even sleep at night thinking about it. So that's when I began to study this thing and say, okay, are there candidates for the Mahdi? Guess what? There was one, and he's still hiding somewhere. I'm serious. His name is Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden. When we took a bunch of these guys at Gitmo after 9/11, and when they interrogated them, they found out that one of the reasons they followed Osama bin Laden was because they thought he was the Mahdi, the expected one. Are you listening? This is what Islamic tradition says. His name, the Mahdi's name, will be the same as Muhammad. Osama started signing his name as Osama Muhammad bin Laden on his papers. His coming will be accompanied by the rising of the black standard, which is the Iranians. And of course, I've already shared with you about that, the black turbans. Al-Qaeda took on the turbans and the banners. How many know that bin Laden was a representative of the Al-Qaeda network? Number 3, there'll be a lunar and solar eclipse in the same month in Ramadan. Now here's what's weird. In the 2004 election, this literally happened in the heavens, and bin Laden, 4 days before the election, decides to release a videotape to the world, reminding the world he was still out there, and telling us, get this, not to vote for Bush. When a terrorist tells you, don't vote for a certain president, go to the ballot boxes and vote the opposite. Because that means he don't want that man in. That's crazy, man. That was stupid. Number 4, a star with a luminous tail will rise in the east before the Mahdi appears. They now say that was the Hale-Bopp comet in 1998. Then the Mahdi will have a broad forehead, a prominent nose, and eyes that are naturally mascara. That looks just like bin Laden. He brings that out. The next one is, he will come at a time when the world is filled with oppression and the Islamic religion is being oppressed by war. Hey, look at all these things I just listed. That's why Osama bin Laden, that's not the only reason, but that's one of the reasons he can play the game with them. He can say, look at this, and look at this, and look at that. And he said, I was able to sit in a cave and conduct a terrorist attack against the greatest nation on earth and bring them down economically. Look at me, what I'm able to do. Preach on, I'm going to. Before the coming of the Mahdi, the following is supposed to happen. Islamic teaching. The red and white death will occur. Red is war and white is a plague. Number 2, the Arabs will throw off all occupation of foreigners that are in their land. That's what they're trying to do right now. Number 3, there'll be a major conflict in Syria and Syria will be destroyed. Now, by the way, that's Bible. So we'll have to see what happens there, because I want to stick with the Bible, not somebody's tradition. Come on, that they're pretty. I'm just showing you that this is what they believe and how some of this is being self-fulfilled. Number 5, death and fear will afflict the people in Baghdad, Iraq, as fire will appear in the sky. And they take that to mean the bombs that have fallen from the warplanes over the country of Iraq. Now, the president of Iran, I call him, Ahmadinejad, I call him the new prince of Persia. He is listed in Ezekiel chapter 38, not he, but his country, which is Persia or Iran, is listed as one of the countries who will be involved in what is called the War of Gog and Magog. Now here's what makes him so dangerous. Number 1, he believes in apocalyptic Islam. Now, we believe in the apocalypse in the Bible. Our apocalypse tells us that bad things will happen, but in the end, things good come out of it, and Christ rules and reigns, and there's coming peace on the earth. So in their mind, there has to be wars and struggles, and the infidel, i.e. Christians and Jews, have to be defeated, and Islam must rule the world by Islamic law, and it will all be done when the Mahdi appears. Number 2, this is the part that really shook me up. Number 14, the coalitions that he has formed. Now, he has already met with those in Lebanon, individuals and leaders in Syria. He's, of course, talked to all the Iranian people, and he even met with the Afghanistan group, the Afghans, and this is what is bizarre. When you look at this list, this is not the list of Ezekiel 38 and 39, but I want you to understand he's forming a coalition of nations to say, if the U.S. or Israel attacks us, he says in Lebanon, Hezbollah is going to have missiles to shoot at Israel, Syria is going to have weapons they can use, and I want the Afghans to watch the backside, cover my back in case something happens from that part of the world. And so he's beginning to form coalitions, which to me, that right there can be very dangerous, not toward us, but toward the nation of Israel. Now, will Israel find it necessary to attack Iran? I'm going to just share this with you. Why does Israel want to attack Iran? Can I tell you? They don't. They don't want a war. They don't want to have a war. They don't want innocent people to die. They don't want any of that to take place. They know the repercussions against Israel are going to be unmerciful if they have to do an attack. But here's the reason why. I'm going to show you a map. The reason that Israel will have to attack is because the following are 5 facilities developed in the country of Iran for nuclear power. There is the Bushehr facility, which is on the coast. It began in 1974 and was abandoned until the 1990s. And this is the one the Russians are help building that's active. Then there's a second one in the area of Shifahan, which this is the plant where Iran is converting converting uranium ore into active uranium, which can be used for a power plant and later a bomb. The Natanz plant is enriching uranium and they installed 3,000 centrifuges there. The territory or the facility in Arak, A-R-A-K, it may be the plant where they are using to make plutonium for bombs. That's what the latest intelligence sources say. And there's a third one down there. You see the QOM. This is on a mountain on a former Revolutionary Guard missile site. And it's believed to be that under that mountain may be some of the chemical and biological facilities. And the source is the BBC, September 2009. That's a recent source. Recent, not that long ago, a source. Now, the problem that you have is not nuclear power. The problem that you have is that this man and individuals in his administration have said once we can enrich uranium and once we can enrich it beyond 20%, we will be able to have a nuclear weapon. We can put it on a warhead, and at that point, everything shifts. We are a nuclear power. You don't threaten us anymore. We go do what we want to do, or we'll send a nuclear bomb your way. That's why Israel has to deal with at least two of those plants, more than likely all five of them. Now, let me share something else with you that you might not be aware of. Secret stashes. Syria was building a nuclear power plant. The Israelis were afraid that they were going to eventually make a nuclear bomb in Syria. So they did something. And that is that they had an airstrike. It was approved under President Bush to take out a reactor. And what was happening, the reason they know this was going to be dangerous for them is North Korea had a ship with 45 tons of yellow cake on it. Now, 45 tons of yellow cake, okay? So this yellow cake was headed to Syria in the year 2007 for the nuclear reactor that was being built. So the Israelis said, this is dangerous. We're going to have a nuclear problem in our backyard. So Bush said, go ahead and attack them. Now, here's what's funny. I'm going to give you just one nugget and one nugget only. What's funny is when the Israeli Air Force got in and bombed it and got out, the Syrians didn't even know what had happened, because the Israelis had put a virus into the back door of the computers of the military and the radar system of the Syrians and shut all the fans off, so all their computers overheated and shut down. Yeah, I mean, you know, and now look, obviously, if I know that, it's not classified, okay? I have some people sometimes that are in the military, they say, boy, you borderline every now and then. I says, no, I don't know anything classified, because nobody would tell me anything, and they shouldn't tell me anything. I said, but this is stuff that is out there. It's just not publicly known or publicly. Now, Israel can do the same thing, because the same Russian group that sold radar system to Syria sold it to Iran. Just thought I'd leave that there for now. Now, here's what happened. One of the dangers is that yellow cake, the 45 tons of yellow cake, what happened to it? It ended up in Iran's possession through Turkey. And 45 tons of yellow cake could, if it's properly converted, be converted into 196 to 287 pounds of bomb-grade uranium. You understand? This is why Israel gets concerned. Now, is Israel planning an attack? Answer, yes. They have on the drawing board an option that if the President of the United States does not put sanctions on, and if the President of the United States does not somehow deal with the Iranians, Israel will have to do it. Now, I don't want to question our President. I really don't. But I am very concerned of how he has treated Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israelis. And I want to share with you why. And let me just share with you why from my heart. Can I share with you from my heart for a moment why? I honestly believe that President Obama believes that he can change the world's view of the United States. That he can make it a more peaceful place. He can make the world a better place. Now, I believe he really believes that. The problem is when you're dealing with Islamic fanatics, they have an agenda that's a religious agenda and not a political. If you're dealing with them in political diplomacy, it never works because their religious idea is stronger than their political idea. So I think it's commendable to say, let us try to deal with them in diplomacy. But there are nations that just does not work. Trust me, believe me, this is one of those nations. So Israel has to deal with them. Now let me give you a little bit of, let's go to the flight zones. there are three ways that Israel can, now the red star is Israel. There are three ways that Israel can do this if they need to do it. Number one, oh boy, help me here, Lord, to say what I need to say. Okay. Number one is to fly from Israel over Iraq straight to the coastline, which is the short distance. They have to get permission from the Iraqis, and the United States has to give permission. They were going to do this under President Bush's administration, and Bush said, no more wars on my watch, and he would not give them permission. I was also told, now this is a rumor, but it's a pretty good source, that they were going to do it right after President Obama took office about February and March, and again they said, no, you were not going to give you permission to fly over Iraq. So they have a second option. The second option is to fly over Israel through Jordan. The Jordanians are the king, I should say, has allowed Israel to fly over their airspace many times. Israel actually protects Jordan and has an agreement with them in the time of a war or an invasion or a coup. They could send troops in to defend Jordan because the Jordanians do a lot of work with the Israelis. Fly over Jordan, and they've got permission to go over Jordan. Now listen to this. And they've got secret permission. Now it's secret in the sense of it's not being publicized, and the Saudis will deny it, but the Saudis are scared to death of the Iranians. Listen, Ahmadinejad will overthrow them. He'll take the oil wells from them, and they know it. He'll kill the royal family. You know, they arrested 100 Al-Qaeda people. Did you see that? 100 Al-Qaeda agents in Saudi Arabia. They were going to bomb things, bomb all the refineries they could get a hold of, and try to kill the royal family. And they know that. So they've been given permission to go over Saudi Arabia. Of course, the Saudis will have to deal with that. And someone said, well, why would the Saudis do it? That's the headquarters of Islam. Well, you know what killed them? You know what did them in? When they let U.S. troops come there. See, that already did it with the fanatical Muslims. That's Bin Laden's big complaint. The fanatical Muslims don't believe the U.S. or any infidel troops should ever be where Medina and Mecca, the two headquarters of Islam, is. So in other words, that's the third. Now, another choice could be to go over Turkey, but I have recently heard Turkey said no. So that leaves right now two options. Either the U.S. gives them permission, or they have to go through Jordan and through Arabia. Now, if you look on that map, there's a country called Georgia. You will remember that Russia invaded Georgia. Does anybody remember when Russia invaded Georgia? That never made any sense to me whatsoever. So I got to checking around and found out one of the rumors was that the Georgian president had given the Israelis permission to land planes. There were drones there that Georgia was allowing to go into Iran and spy out, and they were Israeli drones. And the Russians came in and captured one of the drones and bombed the Georgia airport, so the Israelis could not use it as a base to go into Iran. So this thing has gotten real deep. China and Russia absolutely do not want the war, and I'm going to explain to you very quickly why. It has to do with retaliation. Now I want everybody to clean your ears out, because this is very serious. What I'm about to show you here is very serious, and everybody should from this moment on be in intercessory prayer. The country of Iraq is next door to the country of Iran. Now there are hundreds of miles that separate Tehran, for example, from Baghdad, a long distance. However, when you have certain types of missiles, those missiles could be released from silos, and while the United States already has, in certain Gulf states, brought in the Patriot missile system that protected Israel in the 90s. By the way, it did a good job, but it didn't do that great of a job, to be honest with you. But they've been working on it, so we can intercept certain things. But if we go to war or Israel attacks, Ahmadinejad, unless Israel uses an EMP to knock out the electricity, which they could, or unless Israel goes in, shuts down the computers, which is possible, if missiles are released, here's the one reason why the U.S. has said we don't want to go to war. I want you to look here at this map, number 18. It has to do with danger to the United States bases in Iraq. You have to understand, do we have anybody here that's been to Iraq? We've got several. Well, you men know our bases are basically outdoors in the desert. They don't have a lot of underground facilities like we have in the Midwest. In other words, in a major war in the U.S., a lot of our military could go underground and be protected at certain times. These bases are in tents or in buildings, and so there would be, from the time missiles go got across, there could be a great danger to some of the military bases, and that's what we need to be praying about, that if something were to break out, that our military would be protected. Now, I will tell you this. Let me just stop and just build your faith in the U.S. for a minute, okay? If Ahmadinejad got crazy, in 1 hour's time, the United States military could decimate the whole place, and there wouldn't be nothing. We don't want people decimated, but I'm saying they could if we wanted to. And I've got news for you. The Israelis could if they wanted to. They've got 2 to 3 weapons that if they really had to use them, they could use them. But they don't want to have to use a higher grade level weapon, without me saying too much, unless they would have to. This is reason one. Now let me give you the second reason. The U.S.'s reason has to do a lot with this, but here's reason number 2. There's not been a war yet. It's called the Strait of Hormuz. Now the Strait of Hormuz is in the area of the Persian Gulf. It's a waterway between the country of Oman, which is to the south, and Iran, which is to the north. It's about 29 to 30 miles wide in its longest part. There are 15 tankers that carry 17 million barrels of oil a day that pass through the Strait of Hormuz, which is 40% of the seaborne oil shipments go through that strait. 20% of all world shipments have to go through that 29, 30-mile opening to bring the oil into the Gulf, up through the Suez Canal, and to take it out to the different places where it's going to be refined. Ahmadinejad has said to the United States, if Israel or America attacks us. Now, Iran does have underwater explosives that if you put them in water and a ship hits it, it will really do damage to ships. But he has already used that in the past. That was used not by him, but that was used in a previous war, so we know that exists. He has placed oil tankers with bad oil along the coast in certain areas. Now, someone asked me when they heard this, why would Ahmadinejad take oil tankers with bad oil, just bad quality crude, and line it up? Is he going to sell it? No, he will explode it. So what he would do is he would explode it and produce massive black clouds, and hopefully interfering with the ability of pilots if they have to see a target, or just the whole general idea of if the winds are blowing toward Iraq, it would create. You saw what happened in Kuwait, how terrible it looked, and how you have to have the gas mask and certain equipment to go into the places where the oil is burning like that. So he does have plans to do this type of thing. So the reason that we wouldn't do it, and this is a no-brainer, is because if oil got shut off there, the price of oil would skyrocket. I asked a retired colonel who does projections on terrorism. I said, sir, what would happen if Israel and Iran went to war and it affected the Strait of Hormuz? Now, this is what he told me. He said, our projection has been that oil would eventually go up to $250 a barrel. Now, when it went to 148, we paid $4 a gallon, okay? So figure it out. That adds another $2 or so, maybe a little higher. Now, it doesn't last forever, and America has the strategic oil reserves. If I remember correctly, it's enough for 90 days. If we were just to continue going in the United States, we could go off of that for 90 days. However, you could see it's the environmental problem, it's the oil cleanup, it's the cost of the cleanup. So this is the reason why the danger to the troops, and also the situation of the Strait of Hormuz. Here's a third reason, and this is interesting. Let's show this. The third reason is sleeper cells. It is believed that these are areas, now this is an older map that deals with this, goes back a while back, but these were areas where they identified Hamas, Al-Qaeda, the Islamic Brotherhood, Islamic Jihad, Algerian, Moroccan, Somalian. These are cities in the United States where it's believed that there are sleeper cells. I won't name her, but I had lunch with a secretary to one of the highest ranking people under the Bush administration. In fact, she literally was in the White House every day. And I said to her, how many terrorist sleeper cells do the Justice Department think are here? Her number then was 5,000 conservatively. I said, how do you know? She says, these are people that got in from countries whose visas totally ran out, that they have completely disappeared, and we believe that there's at least, now imagine that, 5,000. Wow. Now, what does that mean to you and I? Listen to me carefully what it means to you and I. It means that Christians need to begin to seek God and call on the name of the Lord and not wait till something major happens like this and then say, oh, now it's time to pray. Do you know that when we pray and when we call upon the name of the Lord, it is possible, it is not impossible. If this is not God's time for something prophetic to happen, this man could drop over with a heart attack by saints of God praying, and the angel of God could touch him and remove him from the scene. It can happen that quick. But one point to be made is this. Persia is involved in Ezekiel 38 and 39. If this war does not happen in the next 24 months, there will be a major war, Ezekiel 38 and 39, that will happen. If there is an attack on this country, then that stands to reason why Persia would come back and retaliate against Israel later. Did y'all hear what I just said? Why is the war of Gog and Magog so important? Here's why it's important. It is the only place in the Bible where it gives you a time frame and says after the war they burned the weapons for 7 years. And in Daniel 9:27, the Antichrist makes a covenant for 7 years. And most scholars believe that the war of Ezekiel 38 and 39, that the rapture happens either before it, while it's going on, or shortly thereafter. Now, folks, can you see where we're at? Can you see? Come on, talk to me, somebody. Give the Lord a praise right now. I want you to give Him glory right now before... Wow. Go ahead and let's cut the taping off. Let's give a Lord another praise. I don't want this on tape, so let's cut the tape off. Hallelujah, glory to God. There we go again. There's that Perry Stone cutting that tape off. Oh, I'm so notorious for this, and people who don't get to these meetings hate me for doing this. They call my secretaries. What did he say? I wasn't there. Well, ask him.